So I got myself a new camera and noticed that it can save images as a RAW file. When I transfer these RAW images to my computer, I noticed that they're much larger in file size compared to JPEGs, and they don't even open on my computer. I need a software that came with the camera or something like Adobe Lightroom to view them. I have to convert this RAW image to a format like JPEG to upload them or send to people. My camera can save in JPEGs, so why should I even bother with saving images in formats that's larger and incompatible for the web? What exactly is a RAW file, and how do I make use of it? What am I missing out by not saving in RAW? So before we talk about RAW images, we should talk about JPEG images. JPEGs are the most commonly used image format on the web. They're good for high-quality images of realistic scenes with smooth variations, and capable of adjusting compressions to favor image quality over file size. It's the most common format saved on digital cameras and compatible with a ton of software and devices. JPEG is a compressed file and is called a lossy format. Every time a JPEG file is edited, it loses information that can't be retrieved. JPEG records 256 levels of brightness. RAW files contain all the data captured from the camera's image sensor and is the uncompressed image file. RAW files retain somewhere between 4,000 to 16,000 levels of brightness. So for the same shot, RAW files retain much more information compared to JPEG files. This extra data is very useful when editing images in post, as it allows for more significant changes without loss of quality. Shots that are too dark or too bright are easier to fix if saved in RAW. White balance is also easier to fix in RAW images. This power does come with a few drawbacks. RAW images are much larger in file size compared to JPEGs. It can slow down the camera in some cases, for example when burst shooting. RAW images need to be converted before it is compatible with many software. RAW files look flat and will probably require post-editing. Post-editing can increase work to your workflow. Benefits of shooting RAW is huge though. The highest level of quality is retained. It's easier to fix exposure and white balance. It's easier to edit sharpness, noise, colors, and contrasts. RAW file edits are non-destructive. It's fun. When you shoot in JPEG with your camera, the information from the sensor is processed in the camera and compressed into a JPEG. When you save in RAW, you retain that full uncompressed information from the sensor. You have full control of processing the image before you export it into a format of your choice. With a bit of practice, you will process much satisfying images than your camera. RAW files require editing, and you can do so using a software like Adobe Lightroom. I'll briefly show you how to open a RAW image in Lightroom and export it to JPEG. I'll also compare the difference in the editing between RAW and JPEG images. So here we have two of the same image taken handheld at night with an aperture of f4, ISO 800, and a shutter speed of 1/5 of a second. The image on the left is the RAW image, and the image on the right is the JPEG saved directly from the camera. At this point, the JPEG image has more contrast and vivid colors with less noise, but most of the grass, the trees, and the house is too dark to even identify. The same image in RAW looks quite flat, but we can see the grass area, the trees, and the house. We'll open both these files in Lightroom and see how much detail we can bring back from these underexposed areas. We'll also change the white balance, add some color changes, and edit the sharpness and noise. We'll start with increasing the exposure of the JPEG image, and we can see that the dark areas in the grass and trees have lost its details. It's apparent that the details are missing in the shadows of the trees and the house on the right. The sky also looks very noisy, as well as the grass. In the RAW image, we can see that there's much more detail left in the shadows as we increase the exposure. We can see that the blob in front of the house is actually a tree. Fixing white balance in JPEGs can be challenging sometimes, as artifacts and banding appear. There's also much less control in JPEGs, where the slider starts from -100 to 100, where in a RAW, the slider ranges from 2,000 to 50,000, both in increments of 1. Editing RAW also allows selecting from several presets, while this isn't possible for JPEGs. JPEG images show much more imperfection when adjusting hue and saturation compared to RAW images. Both file formats do really well when the colors don't have much tonal range. However, the JPEG suffers in quality when the color has a lot of range. Though unprocessed RAW images look noisy, it's quite easy to adjust noise and sharpness. In JPEG, it's much more difficult to fix noise when you start editing, as more noise gets introduced into the image. So I'll try to edit both these images by increasing the exposure to bring back some of the details from the shadows. I'll also apply some color changes where it's possible, and also adjust the white balance a little to make it cooler. Here are the results. With the JPEG image, the dark areas were restored to show the grass and the house, but the contrast and colors are missing. There's also banding in the clouds, and overall there's not much range in color in the entire image. With the RAW image, I was able to retrieve more detail from the shadows, especially around the house on the right. The clouds have less noise. I was able to add more color in the image, which wasn't possible in JPEG. Once I'm happy with the edits on the RAW image, I can then export it into a JPEG. My raw image is kept safe and unchanged, as these edits don't affect the raw image itself, but saves the changes on the metadata. So here are the two final images side by side for comparison. So raw files not only allow more adjustment, but also more detail to be recovered from an image. If you don't feel confident in making the switch to RAW, you can always save the image in both RAW and JPEG. I hope this video helped you see some of the advantages of saving images in RAW. If you found some value in this video, please hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.